Welcome back to Pivot Point. I'm your host, Maya Rocky. More sequestration. What is it? What's happening? I'm pleased to be joined by Eric Shulman. He's the legislative representative at the American Federation of Government Employees, the largest federal employee union representing more than 650,000 federal and D.C. workers nationwide and around the world. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, there has been a lot of spin in the media that sequestration is nothing but a name, that it will not have real consequences for the American people. What's your take?
Well, that's wrong. It will have real consequences for the American people. The consequences may not be felt immediately, but they will be felt, and they will get worse over time.
So with that, we had last week I told a story about a woman who came over to us talking about she's a human resources manager at the Department of Defense, and that they've already been notified that they will be furloughed, and that the amount of days that she has to take off actually amounts to $800 a month in cuts, a pay cut for her. Do you have evidence of real furloughs taking place across the federal workforce?
Well, in order to do a furlough, the government has to notify employees, has to provide them with 30 days notice. Mm-hmm. And so nobody has been furloughed yet, but just the other day, furlough notices went out to all of the Border Patrol agents and Customs and Border Protection agents who protect the border. And that notice said that they will indeed be facing furloughs over the course of the rest of the year, perhaps one day a week for some long period of time. So, yeah, furloughs are being felt in I think almost every quarter of the federal government, but the hurt goes beyond just the hurt to federal employees.
Let's talk about that.
Yes, it's going to impact older people on Social Security, for instance, because the Social Security Administration is going to be experiencing significant budget reductions as a result of sequestration. Many people have heard that Social Security is exempt, and that's true of benefits.
Right.
But you also have to run the program, and the operations of Social Security are funded through the appropriations process and therefore subject to sequestration. As a result, people who are applying for benefits or have questions about what their benefits will be or questions about whether they might be eligible for disability are all going to find themselves waiting quite a bit longer for answers to those questions.
In fact, I actually have a notice from the acting commissioner, Carolyn Colvin, who says as a result of sequestration, visitors to our field offices will wait significantly longer, and callers to our 1-800 number will wait almost 10 minutes for us to answer. We also estimate that pending levels of initial disability claims will rise by over 140,000 people, and on average, applicants will have to wait about 2 weeks longer for a decision.
That's right.
So that's real cuts, and that is directly from the acting commissioner of Social Security Administration, Carolyn Colvin, who's talking about the likely impact on people who are looking to be served by Social Security. How does it work for Medicare?
Medicare actually will have the same administrative impacts because the administration of the Medicare program is conducted by federal employees through the Social Security Administration. And therefore, we will see problems associated with applying for Medicare benefits, and timely notice of receipt of benefit payments and that sort of thing are all subject to sequestration and will create problems for beneficiaries for as long as it's in effect.
And in fact, up to 2% of doctor payments are up for cut as well.
That's correct. One of the problems with reducing payments to doctors is you get to a point where doctors in certain areas around the country simply decide that it's not worth it to them.
They don't want to do it.
Accept Medicare patients.
That's right.
And so you find in some areas around the country you can't find a doctor who's going to accept Medicare.
Right.
Now there are places around the country where that's not possible because so many patients are under Medicare that the doctors simply can't afford to ignore that very large patient population. But But that is not the case everywhere.
Now, Eric, we've heard horror stories about the lines that are going to be long in airports, that TSA agents are going to be cut, that, air traffic controllers are subject to cuts. Is that in your jurisdiction?
I am only aware of the same reports that you've heard about lines at airports and in other places. I don't know for sure whether they've begun to materialize, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised. Less personnel means less coverage, and less coverage means longer lines.
And less safety.
Correct, and less safety. We have to be concerned about the homeland security impact of a lot of these cuts. It used to be that in the years after 9/11, the Congress would never think of reducing spending for homeland security, but now beyond a decade out, homeland security spending is on the block in the same way that so much other spending is on the block. And sure, we Americans can and should be nervous about those reductions,
including disaster relief. And you would have thought that after Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Sandy, that we wouldn't dare do that to ourselves. But it seems like we're a sucker for pain.
Yes, the reductions are in all appropriated programs. Sequestration is a mindless failure by the U.S. Congress to come up with a better plan for reducing the deficit, because there was no agreement, because they have not been able to come to an agreement. This automatic series of across-the-board cuts went into effect on March 1st, and as I say, it represents a failure of Congress to do the right thing.
But this comes on top of, the federal pay was frozen a couple of years ago, and there have been other already cuts to federal employees. Is there a war on federal employees, do you think?
Well, it is often the case that when members of Congress, particularly Republicans, talk about reducing the budget, their favorite target is federal employees. They believe...
Exempting themselves.
Except for themselves, precisely. But all other federal employees should be subject to the budget knife. And whether it's their retirement benefits or their pay or overtime benefits, there is a perception among some on Capitol Hill that federal employees deserve these reductions. And it's a fallacy. Federal employees are paid lower wages than their counterparts in the private sector, and there is no justification for reducing the benefits or pay of federal employees any more than there is reducing the pay of non-federal employees across the board.
So, Eric, tell us about Sequester Central and what AFG is doing to fight back.
Well, one of the things that AFGE is doing is conducting a series of rallies around the country on March 20th. Many of these rallies, in fact, will take place at Social Security offices. And we are encouraging anybody who is concerned about budget reductions and the sequester to turn out, to show up and march with other folks of like mind who want to show their anger and frustration and concern about these bad economic policies that the Congress is forcing on the American people.
So where can our listeners go to learn more and join up with you?
Well, as far as AFGE is concerned, many of the events, as I say, are going to be at local Social Security offices.
Any website?
They can go to afge.gov and get more information about where events are being held. And if they haven't heard, they should, on March 20th at lunchtime, take a walk or a ride down to the Social Security office, because I suspect that most offices will have some kind of an event.
Okay.
And folks will be looking for ways to reach the news media and tell their story.
All right, there you go. Eric Shulman, Legislative Representative at the American Federation of Government Employees. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure.
You are listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockymore, a show brought to you by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Stay with us after the break when we talk about how we treat our restaurant workers in this country, a conversation with Saru Jayaraman behind the kitchen doors.